Hi, I'm Shrankla Holochak, the founder and CEO of Uma, an Ayurvedic beauty and wellness collection. This is the Uma Ayurveda podcast. Each week, I'll be having a conversation with someone I greatly admire on the topics of Ayurveda, holistic healing, spiritual well-being, and alternative health. By sharing wisdom, I hope to share a personal truth and revelation with you that as ancient as they are, Ayurveda and other healing modalities are as modern and relevant today as ever. My guest today is Damian Hagglund. Damian was brought into being by an Australian mother and Swedish father. He was born in Bali and grew up in India with traditional and tribal Ayurveda as a way of life. He has been living and educating in the West for 15 years and is excited to share his perspective on health and wellness in today's time. Damian, I'm so excited to have you speaking with me and our audiences today. You have such great and rich expertise in Ayurveda and specifically within Marma points, which has been a topic of great interest, not only to me, but a lot of our listeners. And I do look forward to elaborating your personal journey as well as the expertise within Marma points that you bring to bear. I would love to start with a rather general question around what got you interested in Ayurveda in the first place.
Well, I grew up for a lot of my childhood in India. My parents sent me to an international boarding school in Vrindavan, which is where Krishna was born. It's about 3 hours from New Delhi. And in that boarding school, Ayurveda was one of the topics, as well as yoga and Vedanta. And so I had learned the basics of Ayurveda as a child. And then when I was 19 years old, I actually suffered from sciatica and I had a lot of digestive troubles I would get, or the doctors diagnosed me for having irritable bowel syndrome, which now I find out is actually quite common. I searched for Ayurvedic doctors and I was in Jagannath Puri at that time studying, doing my bachelor's in classical Indian music. And I met my teacher and Ayurvedic doctor, Dr. Madhusudan Rai. And he's actually a Ayurvedic doctor and practices Marma Chikitsa. So I started to spend time with him. Well, he actually told me that I really had digestive troubles, which was causing guntis, which are knots. And these guntis knots in my stomach were actually pulling on my spine, which was giving me sciatica. He was able to teach me those practices, and I healed from both of those things within a week or so. I stopped showing signs in my stomach. He was able to teach me how to control the acid in my stomach, or the pitta, which can be quite aggressive in its nature. And once I felt the results in myself, I was actually quite surprised how powerful Ayurveda is and how simple it actually was for me to just change my lifestyle and get to the root cause of how I was getting these symptoms. And then I was absolutely fascinated by this modality that I hadn't really paid much attention to because I was young. I was in my fittest years. I was 19 years old when I met him. And I was even in shock that I could get sciatica and digestive troubles because I was so fit. But yeah, it was just very surprising to me that it was so simple to heal such a painful experience that I was going through was so easily healed through Ayurveda.
I hear you both in that sometimes it's easy to sort of push through either physical or emotional pain with just energy added, whether it's when you're physically young and able to just plow through, or don't want to do something about it, but also on the fact that I love Ayurveda in that the changes are simplistic and very intuitive and profound, which is what makes them so compelling in the relief they're able to bring us. So what you just said definitely resonates with me in a big way. Dani, did you then undertake a more formal education around Ayurveda given your experience?
Yes, I was already a huge fan of Dr. Vasant Lad, and my mother had brought me up with his remedies and his books. I'd also grown up with Dr. Devendra Vora. He has this book called Health in Your Hands. My mother used those throughout my entire childhood. I used to actually think it was funny, and I would joke around with her. Then when I had ear pain, she'd be pressing the end of my pinky, and I would joke around saying, "That's not my ear." But it worked. So I that's why I searched out somebody who knew Ayurveda and preferably did Marma Chikitsa, because Devendra Vora is that practices Marma, but he educates it in a very Western way, or he calls it acupressure.
Sure.
So it was very easy for my mother, who found this book back in 74, I think, 1974, and she had carried this book with her, and I was born in 77, so she had quite a bit of experience in Ayurveda. She was a huge fan of Vasant Lad, and I'm still a huge fan today of his. I watch anything he releases on his website or on YouTube, and I'll also go to courses of his that he has around here in America. Yeah, so that's why I sought out someone who practiced Ayurveda but also understood Marma Chikitsa. It was already embedded in my lifestyle. And so when I did go to study with Madhusudan Rai, he said that I was actually too old. He only takes young students so that they can learn yoga and malkhamba and learn pranayam and all these things from a very young age. So the lifestyle is already embedded in them as they learn Ayurveda. But then I told him about my past, and I'd gone to a Gurukula where I learned all these things, the boarding school, and also my mother's history. And that made him accept me as a student. And I used to go to his 5 a.m. yoga classes for kids, and I was definitely the oldest person there. These were all, nobody was more than 14 or 15 years old in the classes. And they would do malkhamba, which is these wooden pillars that they do all their yoga asanas on. And they also do yoga asanas on ropes, because he comes from a warrior tradition, the Kshatriya tradition of Ayurveda, which is a lot of wrestling and learning how to move swords and bows and arrows. And a lot of it is based on pressure points. And so the Malkhamba system and the rope yoga is all about, when you're a child, you put yourself onto the khamba to get the pressure points pressed. And as you're older, these pillars turn into small jimmies, or like our thumbs, that do the pressure on us. And when we're young, we throw our bodies onto the jimmy. We call them jimmies also. And so it's a very deeply lifelong practice that he wanted me to live Ayurveda, because he said each one of us has a personal Ayurveda, and it's through the journey of learning Ayurveda and practicing it in ourselves that we can get mastery over it.
A question came to me as you were talking about everyone's personal journey, and I think so many of us would be so interested in learning what your journey and what your definition of Ayurveda is.
The way I was introduced to it was my teacher wanted me first and foremost to get in contact with my gut intelligence, or he called it my pachakapita or ranjakapita, the different types of fires in my body, and the heat and the intelligence that comes from the gut. So the first practice I did with him was understanding core temperature. And if my stomach gets too hot, what are the signs and symptoms and imbalances that come from that, and what comes from getting a stomach that's too cold? And the IBS and the sciatica I had was coming from hot stomach. And he had me starting to drink a small cup of hot water before every meal. When I woke up in the morning, about 45 minutes to an hour after eating, so that I would start to get in touch, in contact with my gut intelligence, and also learn how to listen to it. Now, the reason he wanted me to have plain hot water, not too hot, hot enough that you still have to blow and sip on it, yeah?
Yep.
So that when I drink this cup of hot water, it brings all my brain's and body's intelligence. It's a little bit like food coma when we eat a meal. The body and the brain slow down so that all the energy can go to digestion. Now, when I would drink this cup of hot water, it would bring that intelligence from my brain and my body to my stomach, but there's nothing to digest, not even chamomile, the flavor of chamomile, not even peppermint, not even clove, none of this. He wanted completely zero. Hot water, plain hot water, gives you a state of zero. Chamomile asks you to go into a state of chamomile. Hot water has a zero signature to it, so it allows you to really be in contact with the self and listen to the self, as that self will be colored by the turmeric in the water. It'll be colored by the lemon in the water. So he wanted me to get that zero state of consciousness and the ability to listen to my core and listen to my stomach. And that really started to teach me. My stomach, my gut taught me when I would get acidic, what things create gas, how long was too long without food, how much water in a meal was uncomfortable, and not enough liquid in a meal would be uncomfortable. It started to teach me all these things for me. Instead of having a general idea of it, I got a personal idea. And my teacher wouldn't teach me much about what I had learned before, because those were very general concepts. Let's say, for example, cauliflower is gas producing. Yeah?
Yep.
Which is well known in Ayurveda. And we do things like putting mustard and cumin and turmeric and ginger and, steaming the cauliflower and adding other vegetables and proteins and fats to reduce that gas producing effect that cauliflower can have. But my teacher wanted me to personally experience it rather than just understanding it in my mind. And so when I started to actually practice from the simplest form of practice, which is a cup of hot water, that is the simplest thing that I could put in my stomach. And from there on, everything else I put in my stomach, I started to be able to read the reaction my body had, how it made me feel. Was I tired? I found that one of the things that he taught me later on, when I had some realizations myself, I realized that I was eating Indian foods like wheat and rice and lentils and a lot of spices. And I found that spices didn't work that well for me. And actually grains would make me really tired. And beans and lentils made me gaseous. So I brought these things up to him. And he told me that it's probably because I'm Swedish. And in Sweden, they don't eat these foods. They have a much higher protein and fat diet because of the colder regions. Not as much fruit and vegetables as people eat in the tropics. So I started to research and find out what people eat in Sweden. And my mother's uh, genetics come from France. So I started to look deeper into what were the food culture of those places and actually apply them to myself to see the difference. And I would see the difference between when I ate a khichdi or I ate uh, uh, more cheese and fatty olive oil based foods. And I could totally see the difference. My resilience to foods that were from tropics was not as strong. I would get tired, I'd get more gas. And of course, I knew how to balance those in times when I couldn't eat a Swedish diet, which was a lot of the time, because I'd be going to my teachers' homes, or to going to the temples to partake in prasad, which is food that's been offered to the gods at the temple. So I would see the difference from one meal to another. And I was fascinated of what my stomach was telling me, what my core told me. There's a massive intelligence inside there, a huge brain. And this brain started to communicate with me. And not only could I became really good at what to eat and when to eat and how much to eat, I also started to be able to use my gut to digest things like topics, situations, environments, people, different culture. I could digest things better, not just food and liquids, but I could also digest an environment. And that ability to digest the environment helped me code my food better. And the food helped me understand my environment. So it was something that I was 19. I was absolutely fascinated and blown away that this is going on and I didn't know about it. So yeah, I really took it very seriously, and I'd grown up as a monk in a gurukul, so discipline was very natural to me, and I actually felt more comfortable with dinacharya, which is the Ayurvedic word for routine. And that routine started to show me very clearly which foods affected me and which diet affected me in which way, because I was so timed with everything. And that's basically how I began my journey in Ayurveda.
I like the stark example of using something as practical as hot water to pave the way for greater intuition and listening to one's body, which at bottom is what Ayurveda is. And it's definitely a break and a departure from the habit of constantly listening to best practices perfected by 10 or 20 or 30 people and written up in an article, but instead pivoting from that thinking to what is the best practice for your body, which is such a subjective thing versus an objective thing. But I like deeply the parallel and the starkness of something such as hot water being the conduit for starting to listen to your body more and really fine tune that dialogue and that communication, so it comes through more and more clearly, not just in terms of foods, but in terms of assimilating one's environment. Because just yesterday I was in a conversation talking about how ama, which is the toxin in the body, can generate, yes, from undigested and unprocessed food within the body, but also from unprocessed emotion. And I love that that you talked about processing environments and emotions and truly digesting them, because that is a very important way of keeping the body detoxified from that undigested emotion.
Yes. And that's how I learned Marma. Once my teacher was happy, he wanted me to always self-realize. So he would teach me very little. And it's only when I had a realization would he open up that realization into more light and shine more light on the topic. And I recall having a personal realization that by taking care of my stomach and having a proper digestion, I was able to digest ama that wasn't just from my day-to-day life, but ama that was present in my body from maybe years and years ago. And that's when he taught me the word maram. Yeah, the marma chikitsa is all about releasing these knots of ama that are not always based from food. They're not always toxins we induce through our mouth. They can also be toxins we've induced through our eyes or ears or any of our five senses. And these guntis, which he taught me, which is knots, these little knots, they are a product of the nervous system. And the nervous system produces vayu, chetana, the electric current, when it moves through the body, our bioelectricity, and it moves in an uncomfortable high speed, which would be stress. When our electricity gets really fast, it actually produces toxin. It leaves a residue. When people are suffering from tremendous vata imbalance and the nerves are strung and the airs in the body are disturbed, it's very difficult to even touch a person. They don't want to be touched because the nerves are so irritated. There's so many little knots and so much of this vayu that has accumulated, the gases that are produced, and the electric current leaves tight balls of electricity inside the tissue. And these were creating my knots in my stomach all around my belly button. And these were then pulling on my stomach muscles and pulling on my back. And I had the realization that by taking care of my digestion, I was actually eating and digesting up old ama, which is this from stress and nervousness and sleeplessness and any kind of trauma that I had been through in my life would need to still be digested for it to be able to leave my body. I have to excrete, digest and excrete those ama. It's not just going to disappear. And once I told him that, and he was very pleased with my personal realization, he started to teach me how to press different nerve points around the hands and feet and the abdomen, around my face and my chest. And he started to teach me that I can release the ama that's stuck there, that will then get into my body, go through my digestion and be processed. And that's when I started to learn Marma Chikitsa and the science of how to apply pressure to different parts of the body to release this ama.
Damian, I want to come back and spend a lot of time on Marma Chikitsa, but quick pause to articulate in your words, because you touched on that in many different points in the conversation, the idea of disease and imbalance within the human body, and how it is created from the perspective of Ayurveda, how disease happens.
Well, really, the realization that I came to, and my teacher has taught me, and then his teacher taught him, was we are a product of our environment. And there are five senses that are taking in information. And any of these senses can bring stress into our nervous system or create a state of imbalance, we could call it. And over years, we call it vrikriti. And prakriti is what we would be in our nature if we were completely living in the wild. My teacher always says this one joke when I would come to ask him about vrikriti and prakriti. He would say, well, what do you mean, wild creatures, or do you mean domesticated creatures? Because wild creatures live in a very different environment, and you have to understand their environment to be able to diagnose what kind of vrikriti they would have. And you're going to have to study the environment of a domesticated creature to be able to understand how they could have possibly gotten their vikritis. And only then can you reverse those habits, or those stresses, or those imbalances need to be reversed. And you need to understand the environment that a person or animal grew up in, or a plant, that what are the conditions that have brought this imbalance upon them. And that's what diagnostics is all about in Ayurveda. They are able to, through pulse diagnose, through pressure points diagnose, through looking at the tongue, the eyes, they can look at your skin, and they're able to see the results of the environment. So what has the environment done? Say someone who's living in a very dry land, say Los Angeles, and they're not applying cream and taking good oils, you'll start to see dryness on their skin and little pieces of skin coming up from the nails. The heels will crack. The calf muscles and around the ankles, very dry skin starts to form. Now, it's not too hard to understand that because of the environment the person is living in, a dry, deserty place. It's very highly possible that they're getting that from the environment. Now, that's not always the case, because some people are getting dryness in moist places, yeah? But then the environment is going to be probably diet, or a stressful lifestyle, or a lack of collagen, or a dehydration, yeah? But these are still environments that the person's in. They're living in an environment that lacks hydration or oilation. So getting enough good quality cold pressed organic fats, if the person's lacking that in their diet, which is an environment, they're living in an environment that lacks good fats, that should be visible on the skin. Ayurveda is the science of understanding how something came about and then reversing it, rather than trying to just cure a symptom, which is why Ayurveda needs to be learned and practiced. Getting a little formula for a particular issue isn't getting to the bottom of it. So this is one thing I learned in all the years. I lived in India for 18 years, and I've taken many of my friends and people to different Ayurvedic doctors. And one thing I can say for sure, if you see an Ayurvedic doctor for a particular issue, you will never, ever, ever go back to them with that same issue ever again. And you'll never suffer that in your life, because they taught you how to reverse it. And that's how I would know you're going to see a true Ayurvedic doctor. You should only see them once for that particular thing you went in for. Now, also another thing that's very important with this kind of assessing a situation a person's in is understanding their prakriti. Now, there's many different ways to understand prakriti in Ayurveda. The technique that I was taught, I was taught pulse diagnosis, but I prefer the warrior tradition. Warriors only have a few seconds to assess the body type of their opponent, and they're not going to be able to touch their pulse.
Really quickly, because this is fascinating, I just want to clarify for our audiences that prakriti typically refers to, and specifically in this case, around what dosha one is born with and what we believe is one's natural form of balance in that dosha. And thank you for going into this, because we get so many questions around truly figuring out one's natural dosha and prakriti. So please proceed.
Yeah, so a person in their state of balance, in the warrior caste, you had a pretty high chance that the person was going to be super fit and in their optimal. It was very easy to look at the prakriti of another warrior because they're so fit and in such top health and form. So these warriors only had a few glimpses before they would go to battle with this opponent. So they would measure your height, the width of your hips, the width of your shoulders, and they'd be able to tell which body type that their opponent is and know how to fight particularly for that opponent. And so I learned the science from my teacher over many years of diagnosing someone's prakriti by their bone mass. Now, once we've reached adulthood, our bone mass stays the same. Now, the muscle mass and the amount of fat on the body can change, but the bones stay the same. So a slender, lighter boned person that's either short or tall, we would generally consider someone in the vata. They're the more, I call them thinkers. They're the thinkers. They're very light and have not a lot of meat between the nervous system and the outside world. So they're sensitive to temperature, environments, noise, and they're also they can also sense something that's going to happen before anyone else, like birds or deer, those animals that are very, very highly alert. So the thinner, lighter bones, even if they're tall or short, we would consider the vata types or thinkers. And then hunters, which I call the pitta types, are the more muscular, medium structure or tall, but they're wide, and there's a width to their bones, and they're the muscular, passionate, produce a lot of heat, have digestive systems that are really strong and sometimes a little challenging to keep up with, and very passionate, heal very quickly, are very determined. And there's, of course, a lot of pros and cons of each body type. But we would be able to assess at a glance by their bone mass that they're a hunter. And then you have the kapha types, or I call them gatherers. Now they have very curvy, they're like an hourglass, their shape. And they have the heaviest bones. Now these bones aren't going to go anywhere. They could lose as much weight as they want, become as slim, but the bones are still curvy and strong and heavy set. And those people are very durable, very compassionate and loving, and can remember many people's stories and their feelings, and have this ability to contain a lot. Because they have more bone mass, they can hold more information, more fat, and more muscle. Yeah. Now, core temperature is how we live. In Ayurveda, core temperature is the essence of how we survive. Now, all my teachers from when I was a child had this thing, they called it garam pet thanda ho gaya, pet garam ho gaya, which means your stomach is hot or your stomach is cold. And this is the very foundation of Ayurveda. To me, this is where Ayurveda began. The very concept of understanding our health came from this: your stomach is hot. And here are all the things that come with hot stomach. Now, hot stomach for many years is called inflammation and all kinds of terrifying names we have for them today, because the vrikriti, the imbalance, has gotten many, many years. But if they would cure immediately hot stomach with buttermilk, watered down buttermilk with some black salt and a little bit of black pepper. Yeah. Or they would use orange juice with salt and a little pepper, and you would cool down that heat in the stomach. So different body types have slightly different stomach systems. Yeah. And that is what Ayurveda is about. Once you learn what body type, you start to understand your body type. You know that you're of the lighter frame or the medium frame or the heavy frame, bone mass. Yeah. So you're light boned, you're medium boned, or you're heavy boned. And that would start to give you an understanding of your body type. And then digestive, how does your digestive system work? See, someone who is a gatherer, they may have a strong digestion, but there's so much body mass that sometimes they're actually running cold. They run cold easily because there's more mass than core temperature. Well, it's the same with the lighter body types. They may have a good core temperature, but there's no mass to hold it. So their core temperature is escaping all the time, so they can run cold too. But then the hunters run too hot because their body mass is just in the middle and the heat goes through perfectly through their body, but it can also become too much very easily for them. So they have generally their imbalance of vrikriti will be overheating. And the other two doshas, for the thinkers and the gatherers, they run too cold and they have cold digestion. So that's really the essence of Ayurveda. Once you start to practice that, all the realizations come from within.
I'd love to hear and talk more about Marma points, which I understand is a real specialty and something that, again, I personally would love to get more acquainted with, and I know it'll be a fascinating topic for our listeners. So what are Marma points?
Well, Marma points they're energy points on the body. It's understood in a few different cultures because there's South Indian, North Indian, then there's East India too, where a lot of these practices are. So they slightly vary in their view on the Marma points. But the way I was taught, and I also understand maram, the words in Sanskrit, maram means secret. When Krishna told Arjuna all that wisdom at the battlefield, he told him the maram of life, the secrets of life. And our body has all these secrets that it's holding. Our subconscious and our unconscious holds all this wisdom and information that our conscious mind isn't able to access. And these pressure points, when we touch them, my teacher would always say, if you want to find out how much these kids learned in this semester, you're going to have to do an examination. And that pressure, the pressure applied upon them in that examination will show you how much they learned. So maram means applying the right amount of pressure. It has to be the right amount. If you press too hard, the body contracts in towards itself. It tries to defend itself. If you don't press hard enough, the body doesn't have a reaction. So That's why there's an expertise behind Marma. And a lot of the times, Marma was pressed by the practitioner themselves. And your teacher would teach you to press on yourself, because it's very easy for you to find your point where it's not too hard, but it's not too soft. And in that place of pressure, your body will reveal its secrets. It will release information or ama, like we were talking about before. These knots will release ama. So there's 107 in some traditions. Some traditions there's 108. One tradition I learned in North India said there was 101. So I'm not exactly sure about the way that I learned it was the 107 Marma points.
For me as well. I've even seen 117 in one piece of writing, but
yes, I've seen that too.
107 is what I have seen predominantly, and also what I had learned. But please go on.
Yes, so now these 107 points, it's very important to know that there's charts out there, but if you're an Ayurvedic doctor, these charts are only given to your kids, and your finest student will have that chart. And guess what? It won't be on a piece of paper, because they don't give away these secrets. I had to study for 9 years before my teacher actually opened up the entire chart to me. But he didn't do it in writing. He showed it to me on my body. And I had learned pieces of it. First, I learned all the 107 points in the hands and the feet. And he only let me practice hands and feet, Marma Chikitsa, and around my belly button. Those were the 3 places I was allowed to press Marma points. And he mostly made me practice on myself, because I was in no place to practice on somebody else. I had to practice on myself. So I would do my hands and feet points, and he taught me how to do the 107 points on my hands and feet. And most of the points aren't always needed to be pressed. He would get me to press the most essential points every day, and once every week or 2 weeks, I would do the points that are not as commonly used. And slowly over time, I started to understand through my hands and feet, which are very durable and can also take tremendous amounts of pressure if you're pressing too hard, or if you're not pressing strong enough, or you press the wrong place. Because Marma is actually considered to be very dangerous. If you speak, when I tell people in India that I know Marma, they think that I could kill them through touch. Yeah, because there's a lot of history of India. Marma was practiced by the warrior caste, and they needed to know where an arrow or a sword or a knife should hit in one point. They should be able to disable the person. But that's most of Marma Chikitsa is actually practiced in healing the warriors, and it was a conditioning tool for the warriors to be able to go out into battle, and then it would help them recover. And it's also a system of breaking scar tissue. When you hold a Marma point, the nerve that was sending, for example, 100 watt of electricity was going up that meridian. When you hold that pressure point, it can go up to 200, 300, 400 watts going through that, through those nerves, which actually sends that we call them srotas. The nervous system sends energy, and it doesn't just go through the nerve. It goes through the lymphatic system. It goes through the arteries, the veins. It goes through all the muscle tissue. It goes through the bones. So when this electric current goes up to 200, 300 watts, it clears knots. It clears scar tissue. It clears things that are not aligned and working in the way that the plumbing of the body or the electrical current pathways get straightened out if there's any blocks and knots inside. The reason we call it Marma is because when we touch a pressure point, we're not revealing the secrets of our body to our brain or even to our digestive system. We're just revealing that information to the body. And the body does its own job, just like when we get a cut. There's an initial pain that needs to be there for the body to read what happened and how deep the cut is and what kind of tissue was hurt. But then over the next 6 weeks, it heals on its own. Well, that's what Marma does when you hold a pressure point. And if there's tenderness there, the body reads this code. It hears you. It hears the secret. The secret is now revealed to the body. Then the body, over the next 6 weeks, does what it does naturally, and it tries to fix those discomfort, which was revealing a secret. And that's what the Marma points are designed to do. And actually, Marma was practiced in families all over India, and it still is. They call it dharna, where they pull the toes, and they do this a lot with children. If they have any gastrointestinal trouble, they'll line the child, lay them down, pull the legs out, and touch the toes together and pull them down to see if one toe is shorter than the other. Now, here in chiropractic and the Western understanding, we call it the sacrum. And when the sacrum's out, our alignment goes out. And I learned that the sacrum goes out from the digestion going out. And when the digestion goes out, it pulls the belly button. The belly button, which is the epigastric plexus. It gets tugged off to the side or up or down. And then that's what pulls the sacrum, and then you can see it in your legs and the toes. And even if you push the toes back towards the body, you'll be able to see your heels don't match. And then what they do is they come, they massage the stomach. This has been practiced in India for thousands and thousands of years. They release the stomach, and then they come back and pull the toe of the shorter leg. And then this aligns the sacrum back in, the belly button comes back to the center, and the dharna, your pulse, there's a pulse, the vagus nerve, right around the belly button. If this pulse isn't in the center, an imbalance has begun. And that imbalance turns into disease. So they would release the muscles around, the knots that are around the belly button through that massage, pull the toe, because the belly is what's holding the sacrum out of alignment. So once you release the belly, it's all loose and relaxed. Then you pull the toe, and bam, the pulse of the vagus nerve comes right back into the center, and the person's digestion is back. Because digestion goes out and imbalances start. If your digestion's good, there'll be no imbalances. I was listening to Vasant Ladji's instructions on coronavirus. I mean, he's just absolutely brilliant, that man. And he's teaching us about keeping the Agni, which is our digestive fire or our core temperature, strong and invigorated, because that's what creates a good digestive system. Immune system. A strong digestive reaction and strong digestive core temperature creates a powerful immune system. And so that's the whole science of Marma is really just there to unlock the knots so that the body and the digestion can come back into balance. And of course, the mind is completely. When I first met my teacher, when I was surprised that when I got a hot stomach, I would act like an idiot. I came to him and I was surprised. He taught me the word hangry. He said, "No, you're not an idiot. You're just hangry." And he said, "A stomach full of air is called an airhead." He said, "A stomach full of acid is called an acid head, hangry." And he said, "A stomach full of food is called a sleepy head." And I was like, what? So the head is just a reaction of the stomach? And So then I've practiced this thing. I will do liquid food only, but like high nutrition, good fats, good proteins, good carbohydrates, a balance. And I'll just drink my food for days to see what it's like. What happens when I don't get gassy, airhead, when I don't get acid stomach, and when I don't get full stomach. And I mean, I don't want to brag about it, but I would like people to experience that and then talk about Ayurveda. Yeah? Talk about Ayurveda after you've practiced for a month, not having a gassy stomach, not having an acidic stomach, and not having a full stomach, and then talk about Ayurveda, because it will be coming from an experience of what these rishis and great uh, uh, scientists back in thousands of years ago came to this realization, and this has been passed down for thousands of years, just like medical heart surgery. You know, when did this start? It started a long time ago, and this wisdom has been passed down to today, where we have such a high percentage of guaranteed heart transplants and heart surgery and these kind of things. Ayurveda is the same thing. It's a wisdom that's been passed down for many generations, and that's what I would call the getting to the root of Ayurveda, is understanding that digestive system and how we live with this digestive system.
Very profound. And speaking of passing down, Damien, you have a very young daughter. Are you doing things to integrate Ayurveda in her upbringing?
Absolutely. I would not even know how to not do that, because my life is Ayurveda, you know. So it's impossible basically for me to not introduce her to this concept from day one. And some of the ways that we do that is dinacharya. Yeah, in Ayurveda, it's all about practicing things in a routine, following seasons, having timing. So we do that with Verona. She lives an Ayurvedic lifestyle, depending on which environments we're in, which season we're in, because we move around America, and you know, her grandmother is in Australia and her grandfather is in Sweden, and so we go to different environments, and then depending on the environment, we create a good routine. And we kind of have the same routine. It just changes a tiny little bit to the different environments. Yeah. Like bedtime and bath time, and she gets full oil massage every day. You know, in India, that's a very cultural practice, abhyanga.
And one that I stand by in a big way in terms of neutralizing aches and pains and imbalances, and especially from a beauty perspective, which is something I get asked about a lot at the helm of Uma. But after taking care of gut health and diet, Abhyanga is up there in terms of self-care practices that I propose to people, even as a way of many meditations. So I'm so very glad to hear that your daughter is starting out young in the tradition of Abhyanga.
Well, actually, my mother, she teaches baby massage in the Indian tradition, and
Amazing.
she was there at Verona's birth, and then the day the umbilical cord dropped off, we started massage with a warm bath after, and my mom taught us how to do this Indian baby massage, and I'm actually quite surprised how strong little babies are and how much pressure they're willing to take within like 2 months. My daughter can take incredible amounts of pressure, and she loves it. She could be teething, she could be tired, irritated, anything. Massage time is meditation time for her. She becomes a little warrior. She becomes like she's one of the pelwans at the akhada. You know, she's one of the wrestlers at the wrestling place, and she gets this, her shoulders pick up, you know, and it's a lot about moving. My mom was teaching me it's about moving the lymph, moving all the different dhatus, the 7 dhatus around the body, which are all the elements that are inside us. And it helps to move the fascia and the tissue and all the lipids um, that are inside the body and the bones. And it's just such a wonderful practice to do. And you know, we also study other teachers who teach about baby massage as well. Our mom put us onto some books, and this woman calls it safe touch, and that's really what we call it now. We don't call it Indian Ayurvedic massage. We call it safe touch, and it's about her feeling comfortable and strong, and it's safe. Yeah,
Makes a ton of sense.
yeah. And you know, like there's things we'll use chamomile. We've used clove, but you know, babies are very sensitive. She's only breastfeeding, so what we mostly do is whatever we want to give her, we put it in mom's diet. And we've learned things like chili doesn't go well with breast milk. Even too much ginger or black pepper doesn't go well with breast milk. One day I made some pakoras and mango chutney, and her poop smelled like mango chutney for a week.
Oh gosh.
So we were like, okay, we better be aware of what mom's eating, because baby is made up of what mom's eating. And yeah, so we've learned a lot of Ayurveda watching a little entity, a little soul coming into her body. Yeah, but Dinacharya is really the essence, and we're not strict. Ayurveda is a discipline without rigidity. It's not a rigid discipline, because nature isn't rigid, but she is disciplined. You will have 4 seasons, but they won't always fall on the same day, and they won't always be the same way. So her Dinacharya, her daily routine, you know, sometimes things change. We're having a family dinner, it's an hour late, she pouts, and you know, we try to listen to all the little sounds she makes. But really keeping as much of a daily routine, which is what Ayurveda asks us to do too, adults at any age. So yeah, that's how we try to apply Ayurveda into her lifestyle.
And some great fighting words in there, especially reminding us about the lack of rigidity around Ayurveda, which is balanced and beautiful. And I love that it's a guide and not a prescription. I think it makes it so much more intuitive and palatable for most of us. Damian, this has been fascinating. It has been so personally informative, interesting, and I feel a lot of people in our audience will walk away from this changed in a big way, and potentially having many follow-up questions, which I will be shooting your way. But in summary, would you like to add something about Ayurveda or a tenet from your personal life that you felt like either bears repeating or we didn't cover?
Yes, Ayurveda and psychology are very, very closely entwined. Now, Ayurveda has psychology in it, and it's very sophisticated psychology. Yeah. And I would say for people to to get into their psychology, right now there's this thing called somatic therapy, and it's about going into the mind to remember a situation that, say, for example, caused us stress. And while we think about this, our somatic therapist looks at how our body reacts to this memory. And if the body is cringing, the fingers are going in, the toes, your shoulders clamp forward, well, then there's a stress reaction to that memory. And if your body's all relaxed and you're super calm, then there's no stress around that memory. It's already been processed. And that's what meditation and these kind of practices were designed to bring us closer to those memories and to be able to digest them. But I would say that in today's time, we have somatic therapists, people who are doing like psychology, and they ask the real questions, the questions that we have triggers around. And when we can see a response in our body to that, it's really showing us the real reaction. The mind can make all these excuses and try to justify and do all these things, but the body will not lie. The body never lies. It doesn't know how to lie because it doesn't know what a lie is. So I would say for people to go and learn, do somatic therapy, and then learn how your body reacts when things are brought up that make you feel uncomfortable, because then you could be in your day-to-day life and something makes you feel uncomfortable. You may be able to justify it in your brain, but your body will not lie. And if you can hear your body, well, the stomach doesn't lie too. It twists and turns if it feels uncomfortable. The body is the same. Your fingers cringe inwards. Your body becomes tense. It's telling you it doesn't feel safe. It doesn't like this situation. It doesn't like what's happening. And, I have these Marma mats that I designed, they just have these little pyramids that are like little bit more than half an inch in square, and there's probably 170 of them. It curves, and people walk on these and press their hands. The idea is to press your own Marma points and start to listen to the body. Well, that's what yoga asanas are too. Yep. When we do a asana practice, we start to get in touch with the body. Yeah, and we can hear what the body does. And the meditation, this allows us to hear, because we've practiced silence from the mind. So now we can hear our body or hear our stomach. So somatic, getting into that somatic and listening to the stomach is the way that we can see what environment effect is on us, what a particular environment is doing to us. Not just to our mind, but what's it doing to our gut and to our body. And like these Marma mats that I've created, these were some of my teacher's favorite tool. If he could, I would take him to Vrindavan and Rishikesh, and if he could only take one tool for himself, he would take his Marma mat.
I mean, they sound amazing. And given the importance of the connectivity with the body and any tool we might use to listen better to our bodies, as well as the importance of Marma points, they're a tremendous tool in one's journey of self-discovery, as well as continuing to listen to one's body more. But please go on. I do want to hear about how that concludes.
Yeah, and so I would say with the understanding of the great understanding that we have of psychology today, like Alice Miller, Don Miguel Ruiz, there's so many great people out right now. You can just go online and learn so much about psychology, and learn psychology and see how the body is affected by certain things. Understand what when we behave narcissistically or behave codependently, how our body reacts to it. You'll never do it again. You will completely stop narcissistic behavior the minute you see what it does to the body. It's so uncomfortable. It's so the adrenaline and the toxicity that's produced by being angry or controlling or mean to someone or selfishly, it's poisoning the self. We're not poisoning other people. We have to poison ourselves to poison someone else. And So listening to the body and understanding the psychology of how things affect us, not just mentally, but how it affects us physically and how the stomach behaves. I would say that's very important. And I'd like to also say a few things about this coronavirus that's going on right now. You know, what Vasant Lad was saying was creating a strong digestive power. That is something that I would advise people to do, to use, you know, warm spices in their hot water, have warm spices inside the food, not being empty stomach for many hours, also not having big meals. Big meals make the stomach cold because the digestive, there's more food than the body can digest, and then you have a cold digestion. So not overeating would be a very wonderful thing. Also doing lots of broths from your culture, finding out what your great grandmother or your grandmother, great grandmother's broth recipes are, and the home remedies that were used in your family for many hundreds of years, and using those kind of things to nurture and create a harmony inside the body. So if we do come in contact, which we are probably going to at some point, when we do come in contact with this virus or any other virus or stressful situation, we have a really good backup of nutrients and nurture. Nature is inside us to deal with those situations, to deal with this, and to be really strong and powerful in adapting and evolving as we go through our life. It takes a lot of nutrition, a lot of good sleep, yeah, a lot of self-care. If you look at how many hours wild animals spend on self-care, it's mind-blowing. How much time they groom, how much time they rest, how important it is for them to poop every day, twice a day. How important it is to have water before they're thirsty, food before they're hungry. How important it is to not be hungry and weak because you are prey for something else if you're weak. How to not overeat because you're prey to something if you've overeaten. You're weak, you're slow. Even your own pack will bully you because they see weakness in you. You don't even need an outside species to come and pick on someone who's overeaten or undereaten. These are just primal things inside us. We pick on the weak. I'm always telling mothers to, if you're going to feed your kid, if you've got to eat what you're going to feed them before they eat it. You need to have more energy than they do. If they're hungry, they're going to want to eat you because you're weak. And if you have eaten before, you have the strength to feed them and take care of them. So feeding the body, keeping it nurtured and nourished, having energy is what produces good wattage, good tantra, they call it in India. You have a good tantra. And that's the amount of energy that's stocked and able to be used in the body. So broths and soups and, you know, lassis and, you know, even a drink of chia seeds with lemon, honey, and mint. We could drink that for many hours of the day, never get full, never get acidic, and never get empty. Just something as simple as that, or coconut milk or hemp milk. These kind of things can keep our acid under control. Too much food is too much kapha. Too much acid, too much pitta. Not enough food, too many hours hungry, too much vata. And this is the root cause of how all the things happen. So a lot of the times just doing liquid foods can be really helpful when people are busy and they don't have time to eat, and eating makes you tired and sleepy. Well, you can just drink a lot of your energy and have enough protein, fat, and carbs so it's balanced. Eating an apple doesn't last for more than 20-15 minutes. But if you have that apple with some almond butter or some raw cheese, now you can get an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours from that apple. Having protein and fats to slow down the release of carbohydrates. You can use olive oil on a salad, and that would slow down the salad, for example. And just releasing the release of sugar, if it comes out at a more steady pace, it's steadier in our body, the release of energy, and we're able to act with a clearer mind. And so these are things that I always, for me, mums are the most important, because they deal with the most. They are the most valuable of our species. So a lot of the things I end up teaching, young college students, they're just lucky that I worked with mums, and from mums I learned all these amazing things that we really need to know about life. We're wild animals. As sophisticated as we may think we are, we're just domesticated wild animals. Yeah, when it comes down to our root needs, to eat, sleep, mate, and defend. These things are very primal, and they're still there, even if you have a master's degree in astronomy and you're a great scientist worldwide. You're still an animal when it comes down to the basic needs. And those basic needs, they can run a ruckus. They can run our lives into the ground. I always ask people to keep their stomach cool. Don't let it get too hot, because you'll get hot-headed. Don't let it get cold, because you won't be able to make decisions fast enough for your life. And so keeping that core temperature balanced with the amount of solids, with the amount of liquids, with the amount of hot water, with the amount of cooling drinks, warming drinks, cooling foods, warming foods. These things are organically, when we start to study, listen to our stomach and hear what it's saying, learn a little more about Ayurveda, it starts to just become second nature. And that's really what Ayurveda is.
Damian, thank you so much for painstakingly taking us through both the basics as well as sharing your very deep wisdom on a variety of these topics, including Marma Chikitsa. I will be adding links to your work and some of the amazing resources you referenced during the conversation in the podcast's description. And once again, really appreciate your time. And thank you again for joining us.
It's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much. And we'll be speaking soon.
I look forward to it.
Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like more information on our guests and the additional references during our conversation, please visit us at umaoils.com. That is U-M as in Mary, AOILS.com. And please subscribe to the Uma Ayurveda podcast and share. See you next time.